The crystalline form of Station Commander Trill shimmered with anxiety as he studied the massive vessel approaching Helios Deep Space Station. His faceted surface caught the light from nearby stars, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the command center's walls. The ship that had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel was unlike anything he'd seen in his 3 decades managing the station. "Analysis complete," Commander, reported Security Chief Venn, her bioluminescent tentacles pulsing with concern. "The vessel's armor plating is thick enough to withstand direct hits from our heaviest weapons. Multiple weapon systems detected, including energy cannons, missile arrays, and some kind of magnetic acceleration weapon we've never seen before." Trill's crystalline structure vibrated with worry. Everything about this situation violated the normal protocols of civilized space travel. No trading vessel needed that kind of firepower. No diplomatic ship carried weapons that could reduce a station to atoms. Yet here was this human vessel, claiming to come in peace while bristling with enough armament to wage a small war. "They're requesting docking clearance," announced Communications Officer Prill, her plant-like appendages waving nervously. "The vessel identifies itself as the TES Dauntless, Captain Victoria Rhodes commanding." The station's automatic defense systems were already tracking the vessel, but Trill knew they would be useless against something of that size and armor. His crystalline hands moved across the control panel, initiating emergency protocols. "Seal all sensitive areas," he ordered. "Begin evacuation procedures for non-essential personnel." And he hesitated, knowing his next order would have serious diplomatic consequences. "Activate the distress beacon." The human vessel maintained its position, keeping what they apparently considered a respectful distance. Captain Rhodes's voice came through again, somehow managing to sound both professional and concerned. "Station Commander, we notice your defense systems have activated. Please be assured we mean no harm. Our vessel's appearance is simply a result of our engineering philosophy." Engineering philosophy? Trill couldn't comprehend how any species could consider this normal. The vessel before him packed enough firepower to vaporize his station, yet they spoke as if this was perfectly reasonable. The emergency channel crackled as responses to the distress signal began arriving. The Galactic Council was mobilizing, and defense fleet elements were being diverted to the station. Trill only hoped they would arrive in time if the humans proved hostile. "Station Commander," Captain Rhodes's voice came through again. "Perhaps we should discuss this. Your reaction suggests there may be some cultural misunderstandings at play. We would be happy to power down our non-essential systems and submit to any reasonable security protocols you require." The offer surprised Trill. It seemed genuine, and the humans were making no aggressive moves. Still, procedure was procedure, and he had 15,000 souls on his station to protect. "Maintain your current position." Trill transmitted back. "Our diplomatic team will contact you shortly." He turned to his staff, who were all watching him with various degrees of terror and fascination. "Record everything. If we survive this encounter, the Council will want to know every detail about these humans and their unusual approach to shipbuilding." As Trill watched the massive human vessel hanging in space before his station, he couldn't shake the feeling that this day would change everything. The question was, would it be a change they would live to see? Hours passed as the diplomatic team prepared for contact. The Dauntless remained exactly where it was, making no aggressive moves, but also showing no signs of anxiety about the defense fleet approaching their position. If anything, they seemed to be using the time to transmit detailed technical specifications about their vessel, as if trying to prove they had nothing to hide. "Commander," called Venn, her tentacles now glowing with confusion rather than fear, "you need to see this. These schematics they're sending, half of these weapon mounts are actually multi-purpose systems. They can be converted for emergency rescue operations, debris clearing, or resource distribution." Trill moved to study the displays himself. The more he looked, the more he began to understand. The thick armor wasn't just for combat. It would allow the ship to operate in hostile environments to conduct rescue operations. The massive engines weren't solely for pursuit. They could be used to tow disabled vessels to safety. Even the mysterious magnetic acceleration weapons could apparently be reconfigured to deflect asteroids or space debris. They build their ships to handle anything, Ven mused, not just combat. As if reading their thoughts, Captain Rhodes transmitted again. Commander, we understand our appearance is concerning. Where we come from, space is dangerous. Our first ventures beyond our atmosphere taught us harsh lessons. We lost good people because our ships weren't prepared enough. We promised ourselves, never again. Trill felt his crystalline structure relax slightly as understanding began to dawn. These humans hadn't built a warship that could also conduct trade. They'd built a ship capable of handling any crisis, any disaster, any threat to life that space could throw at them. The weapons weren't the point. They were just one tool among many in humanity's arsenal of survival. Captain Rhodes, Trill transmitted, making a decision that would change the course of interstellar relations. Perhaps we should discuss this face to face. Would you be willing to host our diplomatic team aboard your vessel? We would be honored, Commander, Rhodes replied, and Trill could hear the smile in her voice. Though I should warn you, our artificial gravity is set to Earth normal. You might find it a bit heavy. For the first time since the crisis began, Trill felt his crystalline form vibrate with amusement rather than fear. A small price to pay for understanding, Captain. A small price indeed. Chief Science Officer Zask moved carefully through the Dauntless's corridors, his 8 legs adapting to the unnaturally heavy gravity. The arachnid-like alien's compound eyes took in every detail of the human vessel, recording everything for later analysis. Behind him, Engineer Nixus's anti-gravity belt hummed as it helped support her serpentine form against Earth normal gravity. The medical bay is through here, said Dr. Rachel Martinez, the Dauntless's chief medical officer. Her casual movement under the crushing gravity fascinated Zask. His sensors indicated the humans weren't using any technological assistance. They simply evolved to function under such conditions. The medical bay doors slid open to reveal a facility larger than most dedicated hospital ships. This is excessive for a crew of your size, Nixus observed, her scales shifting colors in amazement. Standard Earth fleet design philosophy, Martins explained, gesturing to rows of advanced medical equipment. We build everything with excess capacity. Those pods over there, they can treat any known species in the galaxy. We developed them after a first contact situation where we couldn't help an injured alien because our medical equipment wasn't compatible. Zask's sensory bristles detected the emotion in her voice. You speak as if from personal experience. Martinez's expression darkened. I was there, watching someone die because you don't have the right equipment. It changes you, changes how you think about preparation. The tour continued through engineering spaces that seemed to have backup systems for their backup systems. Every corridor contained emergency supplies. Every system could be repurposed for alternate functions. Even the ship's recreational facilities could be converted into emergency shelter space. Your species plans for every possible disaster, Nixus noted, examining a wall panel that could apparently become an emergency surgical suite. We plan for impossible disasters too, Martins replied with a slight smile. There's an old human saying, Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So we prepare for things going wrong in ways no one has even imagined yet. Their next stop was the ship's Environmental Systems Center, where Chief Engineer Marcus Wong was explaining the Dauntless's life support capabilities to a group of station engineers. The main system can support 12 different atmospheric requirements simultaneously, Wong explained, his hands moving across the control panels. The backup system can handle 8, and the emergency system can maintain 4. We learned the hard way that you never know who you might need to help out here. But the energy requirements must be enormous, one of the station engineers protested. The inefficiency. Efficiency isn't everything, Wong interrupted gently. Sometimes redundancy is more important than optimization. Space doesn't care about your efficiency ratings when your primary systems fail. As they moved through the ship, Zask began to understand something profound about humans. Each seemingly excessive system, each redundant backup, each multi-purpose design feature told a story. These weren't the preparations of a warlike species. They were the precautions of a species that had learned harsh lessons about survival. In the ship's data center, they found Captain Rhodes discussing Earth's history with Commander Trill. Holographic images showed the humans' home world, a planet that seemed designed to kill its inhabitants, storms that could level cities, oceans deep enough to crush most spacecraft, temperature variations that would prove fatal to most species, and gravity that would cripple most of the galaxy's spacefaring races. This is what you evolved in. Trill's crystalline form vibrated with disbelief. We call it a garden world, Rhodes said with a hint of pride. Though we understand why others might disagree, every step of our development was a fight for survival. When we reached space, we discovered that the void could be even more deadly than our home world. The displays shifted to show humanity's early space program. Zask watched in fascinated horror as rockets exploded, space stations burned, and brave explorers were lost to equipment failures or environmental hazards. Each disaster was followed by improvements, innovations, and increasingly robust designs. Every failure taught us something, Rhodes explained. Every loss made us more determined to over-engineer everything. When we finally achieved faster-than-light travel and met other species, we discovered our experiences were unique. What we considered normal safety precautions looked like weapons to everyone else. Your ships are built like fortresses because your entire history taught you to prepare for the worst. Nixes realized, her scales shifting to a deep blue of understanding. Exactly, Rhodes nodded. But we don't just prepare to survive. We prepare to help others survive too. Every weapon system can be used for rescue operations. Every defensive measure can protect others. We build our ships this way not because we expect war, but because we refuse to be helpless when others need aid. As if to emphasize her point, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Wang's voice came over the communication system, tense but controlled. Captain, we're detecting a massive plasma storm approaching the station. Their shields won't hold against something this size. Rhodes turned to her guests, and Zask saw something in her expression that would forever change his understanding of humans. It wasn't fear or concern. It was determination. Well, she said, already moving toward the bridge, it looks like you're about to see exactly why we build our ships this way. Care to join us? Trill and Zask exchanged glances. The station's most advanced sensors hadn't even detected the approaching storm yet, but the humans were already preparing to face it. Perhaps, Zask reflected, what they had initially seen as excessive military preparation was actually something else entirely. The ultimate expression of a species that had learned to survive anything space could throw at them, and chosen to use that capability to protect others. The bridge of the Dauntless erupted into controlled chaos as Captain Rhodes strode in, followed by their alien guests. Tactical displays showed the massive plasma storm approaching, a roiling mass of destructive energy that dwarfed both ship and station. Status report, Rhodes commanded, sliding into her chair. Storms twice the size of anything in regional records. Wang reported from engineering. The station's shields will fail within minutes of impact. Their design isn't meant to handle this kind of energy distribution. Commander Trill's crystalline form pulsed with anxiety. Our evacuation protocols won't be necessary, Rhodes interrupted, studying the tactical displays. Mr. Wang, deploy the electromagnetic deflector arrays. Full spread, maximum power. Navigation, position us between the storm and the station. We're going to shield them. Zask's compound eyes registered the impossible calculations flowing across the screens. Captain, even your ship's impressive shielding can't possibly. We're not going to block it, Rhodes explained, a fierce grin crossing her face. We're going to redirect it. Those weapon mounts you were all so concerned about. Watch this. Outside, the Dauntless's weapon ports began to transform. Panels shifted, revealing complex electromagnetic arrays that Zask realized had been hidden beneath the apparent weapon systems. The ship moved with surprising grace for its size, positioning itself precisely between the oncoming storm and the station. "Deflector arrays at full power," Wong reported. "Ready on your mark, Captain." "Station Commander." Rhodes turned to Trill. "We could use access to your power grid. It'll help reinforce your shields while we handle the bulk of the storm." Trill hesitated only a moment before nodding. After everything they'd learned about humans today, trust was beginning to replace fear. "Granted." "Nixus, coordinate with their engineering team." The Serpentine engineer slithered to a secondary console, her scales now shimmering with excitement rather than anxiety. Working with Wong's team, she began integrating the station's power systems with the Dauntless's deflector array. The plasma storm hit like a solar flare condensed into a bullet. The Dauntless shuddered as energy levels that would have vaporized most ships crashed against its shields. But instead of trying to block the plasma completely, the ship's arrays began to split and redirect the energy, creating a complex web of electromagnetic fields that diffused and channeled the storm's fury. "Port deflectors at 89% capacity," Wong called out. "Starboard arrays holding at 92%. Hull temperature rising but within acceptable parameters." Rhodes nodded, making minute adjustments to their position. "Nixus, how are the station's shields holding?" "Incredible," the engineer replied, her scales shifting through patterns of amazement. "The integrated power flow is actually strengthening our shield matrix. We're learning more about our own systems by watching how yours interact with them." For 10 tense minutes, the Dauntless stood its ground against the storm. Its arrays glowed like artificial stars as they redirected massive amounts of plasma energy, protecting the station while simultaneously collecting data about the phenomenon. Zask noticed that even in the middle of a crisis, the humans were running scientific analysis of the storm. The storm's starting to dissipate, Dr. Martins reported from her medical station, where she had been monitoring the crew for radiation exposure. No casualties, minimal stress readings among the crew. "Those reinforced bulkheads you thought were excessive." She smiled at Zask. "They just protected us from radiation levels that would have killed most species." As the last of the storm passed, cheers erupted from both the human crew and their alien guests. The Dauntless had just demonstrated exactly why humans built their ships the way they did, not for war, but for survival against the deadliest forces space could produce. "I believe," Commander Trill said slowly, his crystalline form glowing with newfound respect, "we owe your species an apology, Captain Rhodes. We saw your ship's capabilities and assumed the worst. We never considered that such power could be primarily defensive in nature." Rhodes shook her head. "No apology needed, Commander. We're used to being misunderstood at first contact. It's why we always try to demonstrate our intentions through actions rather than just words." Speaking of demonstrations, Wong's voice came through again, now tinged with excitement. "I think we might be able to help improve your station's shield systems based on what we learned during the storm. If you're interested, of course." Nixus's scales rippled with enthusiasm. "The amount of data we collected about plasma energy distribution alone will revolutionize our defensive technologies. Captain Rhodes, would your engineers be willing to collaborate with our team?" "That's why we're out here," Rhodes replied warmly. "To learn from each other and help where we can. Though I should warn you, our engineering teams can get a bit enthusiastic about sharing ideas." Zask watched as humans and aliens began excitedly discussing shield harmonics and power distribution theories. The fear that had greeted the Dauntless's arrival had been completely replaced by scientific curiosity and mutual respect. Perhaps, he reflected, this was the true purpose of humanity's overbuilt ships, not to intimidate, but to inspire confidence that when disaster struck, help would arrive in the most capable form possible. The crisis had passed, but Zask sensed that the real discoveries were just beginning. As he observed Wang and Nixis already sketching out modifications to the station's defense systems, he realized that humanity's excessive approach to engineering was about to change their corner of space forever, and definitely for the better. The weeks following the plasma storm brought unprecedented changes to Helios Station. Engineer Nixis found herself surrounded by holographic displays in the station's main engineering hub. Her serpentine form coiled comfortably as she worked alongside Chief Engineer Wang and his team from the Dauntless. "Your shield modifications are revolutionary," she admitted, watching simulation data scroll past. "We never considered using opposing field harmonics to create self-reinforcing energy matrices." Wang grinned as he adjusted another set of calculations. "On Earth, we call it thinking outside the box. When your home world actively tries to kill you, you learn to get creative with solutions." The engineering bay had become a fusion of human and alien technology. Nix's team had initially been skeptical of human engineering principles. Their emphasis on redundancy and over-engineering seemed wasteful. But after seeing those systems in action during the plasma storm, skepticism had given way to enthusiasm. "These backup systems you're installing," one of Nix's junior engineers commented, his crystalline form glowing with curiosity. "They require significant power resources." "Worth every joule," Wang replied, pulling up a new simulation. "Space doesn't care about efficiency ratings when your primary systems fail. We learned that lesson the hard way during the Mars colony crisis of 2187. In the station's command center, Commander Trill and Captain Rhodes were reviewing the security upgrades. The station's defensive capabilities had been completely reimagined, incorporating human concepts of layered defense and adaptive response. "Your approach to defense is fascinating," Trill observed, his crystalline structure shimmering with interest. "Every protective measure can also serve non-combat functions." Rhodes nodded, highlighting various systems on the display. "These new shield emitters can double as emergency tractor beams. The point defense grid can clear space debris or guide damaged ships to safety. Even the sensor arrays are designed to detect both threats and distress signals at extended ranges." Dr. Martinez had established a cultural exchange program between the station's medical staff and the Dauntless's medical bay. The humans' experience with extreme environments and trauma response was proving invaluable to the station's doctors. "Your emergency protocols are incredibly thorough," the station's chief medical officer, Dr. Wren, noted. His gelatinous form rippled with appreciation as he studied the human medical databases. "You prepare for scenarios we never even considered possible." "When you evolve on a death world," Martinez replied, demonstrating a portable emergency stasis unit, "you learn to expect the impossible." These protocols came from centuries of dealing with everything from volcanic eruptions to solar radiation storms. But it was in the station's engineering core where the most dramatic changes were taking place. Nix's and Wang's teams had begun implementing what they called the Adaptive Defense Initiative, a complete overhaul of the station's systems based on human engineering principles. "Watch this," Wang said, initiating a test sequence. The station's power grid reconfigured itself, creating redundant pathways and backup systems that could maintain critical functions even under catastrophic damage. "It's beautiful," Nixis whispered, her scales shifting through patterns of joy and amazement. "The way the systems support each other, adapt to damage, and maintain functionality even when components fail. It's like watching a living organism." "That's exactly the idea," Wang explained, bringing up more detailed schematics. "On Earth, the most successful organisms aren't always the most efficient. They're the most adaptable. We applied the same principle to our engineering. Every system can compensate for the failure of others." The transformation wasn't limited to technology. Cultural barriers began breaking down as humans and aliens worked together. The station's crew found themselves adopting human expressions and concepts, while the Dauntless's crew learned alien perspectives on space travel and engineering. Zask spent hours in the Dauntless's science labs, his compound eyes taking in every detail of human scientific methodology. Your species approaches problem-solving differently than any I've encountered, he told Dr. Martins during one of their discussions. You don't just look for the most elegant solution, you look for the most robust one. Elegance is lovely, Martins replied, showing him data from Earth's history. But robustness keeps you alive when everything goes wrong. Every major advancement in human history came from learning from our failures. In the station's recreational areas, off-duty crew members from both species shared stories and experiences. The humans' tales of surviving Earth's challenges and early space exploration captivated their alien audience, while stories of alien worlds and cultures fascinated the human crew. I think I finally understand, Nixis said to Wong as they watched their teams working together. What we initially saw as excessive military preparation wasn't about warfare at all. It was about survival, not just your own, but anyone else who might need help. Wong nodded, making a final adjustment to the power distribution calculations. That's humanity in a nutshell. We build everything like it's going to face the worst day in history, because, sooner or later, it probably will. And when that day comes, he was interrupted by a station-wide alert. Commander Trill's voice came over the communication system, tense but controlled. All personnel, report to emergency stations. We're receiving multiple distress calls from the Proxima colony. Their solar shield is failing. Nixis and Wong shared a look. The newly upgraded systems they just finished installing were about to face their first real test. Well, Wong said, already moving to his station, looks like that worst day just arrived, ready to put all this human over-engineering to work. Nixis's scales shifted to a pattern of determined readiness. I thought you'd never ask. The Proxima colony situation was worse than anyone had anticipated. The solar shield protecting the settlement of 30,000 colonists from their star's intense radiation was rapidly failing, its primary generators destroyed by a series of unexpected solar flares. In Helios Station's command center, Commander Trill's crystalline form pulsed with concern as he studied the data. The colony's backup systems are overwhelmed. They have less than 6 hours before catastrophic shield failure. The Dauntless can reach them in 4. Captain Rhodes stated, already coordinating with her crew. But we'll need the station's help. Those shield modifications we just installed. Time to put them to the test. Zask's compound eyes tracked multiple emergency scenarios simultaneously. Even with your ship's capabilities, maintaining a shield large enough to protect the entire colony. We're not going to shield them, Wong interrupted, his hands flying across engineering controls. We're going to move them. Nixis, remember that power distribution system we theorized. The serpentine engineer's scales shifted to a pattern of sudden understanding. The linked deflector array. But we never tested it at full scale. No time like an emergency to validate a theory, Rhodes said with grim determination. Commander Trill, we'll need to divert power from the station to the Dauntless. A lot of power. Trill didn't hesitate. After weeks of working with the humans, trust had replaced doubt. Done. Nixis, begin power transfer protocols. Dr. Wren, prepare medical facilities for possible casualties. The next 4 hours were a blur of calculated chaos. The Dauntless prepared for departure, while engineers from both species worked to integrate the station's power systems with the ship's deflector arrays. Dr. Martins and Dr. Wren coordinated medical preparations, establishing emergency protocols for radiation exposure and mass casualty scenarios. This is insane, one of Trill's advisors protested. We're risking our station's safety on an untested human theory. No, Trill replied firmly, watching the Dauntless prepare for launch. We're trusting our friends to do what they do best. Survive impossible odds and help others do the same. The Dauntless arrived at Proxima Colony with less than 2 hours remaining on the failing shield. The sight that greeted them was terrifying. The colony's dome was visibly flickering under the assault of solar radiation, while the nearby stars spat angry flares in their direction. Colony shield at 18% and falling, Wong reported from engineering. Their generators are completely burnt out. Rhodes's voice was steady as she issued commands. Deploy the modified deflector arrays. Begin power transfer from Helios Station. Nixus, are you receiving the telemetry? Back on the station, Nixus and her team monitored the power flow. Confirmed. Energy transfer stable. The new conduits are holding. What happened next would be studied by engineers across known space for years to come. The Dauntless's excessive power systems, combined with the station's newly upgraded energy grid, created something unprecedented, a massive energy transfer network capable of projecting a shield large enough to protect an entire colony. Deflector arrays at maximum, Wong called out. Beginning colonial evacuation sequence. The humans had realized they couldn't maintain a shield long enough to repair the colony's systems. Instead, they were going to use their combined shield network to protect the colonists while moving them to safety. It was exactly the kind of impossible solution that characterized human engineering. When you can't solve a problem directly, change the parameters. For 6 grueling hours, the Dauntless orchestrated the evacuation. Colonial ships, protected by the combined human-alien shield technology, ferried people to safety. When a solar flare threatened to overwhelm their defenses, the humans used their weapon systems to launch specialized probes that redirected some of the plasma flow. Last colonial ship away, Wong reported, his voice hoarse from hours of maintaining the power systems. Shield network holding at 12%. That's our cue, Rhodes announced. All ships, jump to emergency coordinates. Nixus, begin power transfer shutdown sequence. As the last ships jumped to safety, carrying the entire colonial population to Helios Station, Zask analyzed the data they'd collected. The human shield modifications didn't just protect the evacuation, he reported to Commander Trill. The energy distribution patterns they created actually helped disperse some of the solar flares. The colony site will be habitable again once they rebuild their shielding. In the aftermath, as Helios Station worked to accommodate thousands of refugees, the true impact of human engineering philosophy became clear. The station's new redundant systems, overbuilt power grid, and adaptable space allocation, all based on human designs, made handling the crisis possible. I must admit, Commander Trill said to Captain Rhodes as they watched humans and aliens working together to help the colonists. When your ship first arrived, we thought your over-engineered systems were a sign of paranoia or aggression. Rhodes smiled, watching as Dr. Martins and Dr. Wren coordinated medical care for the evacuees. And now I understand. Trill's crystalline form glowed warmly. Your species builds everything to handle the worst possible day, because you've chosen to be the ones who help when that day comes. Your weapons aren't for war, they're tools for survival. Your overwhelming power isn't for dominance, it's for protection. That's humanity in a nutshell, Wong added, joining them with Nixus at his side. We make things too strong, too powerful, too adaptable, because space is big, dark, and doesn't care if you live or die. But we do care. Nixus's scales rippled with emotion as she watched more ships arrive from nearby systems, bringing supplies and aid. You've changed how we see everything. Engineering, space travel, even how we define efficiency. Your wasteful redundancy just helped save 30,000 lives. That's the real reason we build our ships this way, Rhodes said softly. Not because we expect disaster, but because we refuse to be helpless when others need aid. Speaking of which, she checked her datapad with a grin. Your station's power grid handled that emergency load admirably. But I have some ideas for improving the backup systems. Trill laughed, a sound like chiming crystals. Of course you do, Captain. Of course you do. As the humans and aliens began discussing new improvements and modifications, Zask made a final entry in his genealogical database. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about humans is not their capacity to survive, but their determination to ensure others survive as well. Their over-engineered ships and redundant systems are not signs of fear or aggression, but expressions of hope. Hope that when disaster strikes, they will be ready to help. In this vast, often hostile universe, humanity's excessive preparation may well be the most logical approach of all.